The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Eldoria Palace as Princess Elena walked slowly through the grand corridor. Her footsteps echoed softly in the vast hallway, each sound seeming to carry the weight of unspoken words. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe less. The rare illness that had been quietly ravaging her body for the past year was finally winning its silent war. Elena paused before a massive portrait of the royal family, taken just 3 years earlier. In the painting, she stood radiant beside Prince Alexander, their 2 young children, Prince Marcus and Princess Isabella, beaming with innocent joy between them. Her hand unconsciously moved to her chest, where beneath the silk fabric of her mourning dress, her heart struggled with each beat. The irony wasn't lost on her. She who had always been the strongest voice in the kingdom was slowly losing her ability to speak as the disease affected her vocal cords. Alexander had left early that morning for a series of diplomatic meetings in the capital. He didn't know about the latest doctor's report. Elena had specifically requested that Dr. Hensworth wait until she could tell Alexander herself. She needed to find the right words, the right moment. How do you tell the love of your life that time is running shorter than anyone imagined? The palace staff moved quietly around her, their usual morning efficiency tempered by an understanding that something had changed. Elena had always been beloved by those who served the royal household. Unlike many royals who maintained strict distance from their staff, she knew their names, asked about their families, and genuinely cared about their well-being. Now, seeing the concern in their eyes as they watched her slow movements and increasingly frail appearance, she realized her condition was becoming impossible to hide. Lady Margaret Ashworth, Elena's closest confidant and lady-in-waiting, approached with careful steps. Margaret had served the royal family for over 20 years, and her usually composed demeanor couldn't quite mask her worry. "Your Highness, perhaps you should rest before the children return from their morning lessons," Margaret suggested gently, her voice carrying the familiarity of old friendship rather than mere duty. Elena managed a weak smile. "In a moment, Margaret. I need to finish something first." She walked toward the private study where she often worked on her charitable foundation projects. The Elena Foundation had become her life's work, focusing on healthcare initiatives for underserved communities throughout the kingdom. The irony that she was now facing her own health crisis wasn't lost on her. Settling into her favorite chair by the window, Elena opened her personal journal, a leather-bound book that had been her constant companion for the past decade. She had always written in it daily, documenting not just royal duties and public appearances, but her private thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams. Now, these pages would become something far more precious, her final words to those she loved most. The first entry she began was for Alexander. Her pen trembled slightly as she started to write, the medication making her hands unsteady. "My dearest Alexander," she began, then stopped. How could mere words capture 20 years of love, partnership, and shared dreams? How could she possibly express everything she needed him to know? She thought back to their first meeting at a charity gala in neighboring Astoria. Alexander had been there representing his father, the king, and she had been attending as part of a cultural exchange program. She wasn't royalty then, just Elena Marchetti, daughter of a respected Italian diplomat. Alexander had approached her during the dinner reception, claiming he needed rescuing from a particularly tedious conversation about trade agreements. "I don't suppose you'd be willing to help a prince in distress," he had said with that charming smile that would later become famous throughout their kingdom. "I promise I'm usually more interesting than I appear right now." Elena had laughed, immediately drawn to his genuine warmth and self-deprecating humor. "That depends," she had replied. "Can you dance? Because I've been promised at least 3 waltzes tonight, and so far, no one has proven capable of not stepping on my feet." That had been the beginning of everything. 3 years of courtship, 2 years of engagement, and 15 years of marriage that had produced not just 2 beautiful children, but a partnership that had strengthened both the monarchy and the kingdom itself. Elena had brought a fresh perspective to royal duties, modernizing many traditions while respecting the institution's history. Alexander had supported every initiative, every reform, every bold move she had suggested. Now, as she sat in their private study, surrounded by photos of their life together, Elena knew she had to find a way to tell him goodbye that would help him continue forward rather than hold him back in grief. The study door opened quietly, and 8-year-old Princess Isabella peeked in. Her dark curls, so much like Elena's own, bounced as she looked around cautiously. "Mama, may I come in?" Isabella asked in the formal manner she had been taught for public appearances, though her voice carried the natural curiosity of childhood. "Always, my darling," Elena replied, closing her journal and opening her arms. Isabella ran to her, and Elena gathered her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. These moments were becoming increasingly precious as Elena realized how few of them remained. "Are you feeling better today?" Isabella asked, her small hand reaching up to touch Elena's pale cheek. The child's intuitive nature had always amazed Elena. Despite their attempts to shield the children from the full reality of her illness, Isabella seemed to sense that something was deeply wrong. "I'm feeling peaceful," Elena answered honestly. It wasn't exactly what Isabella had asked, but it was true. Despite the physical pain and overwhelming sadness of knowing her time was limited, Elena had found an unexpected peace in these quiet morning moments. 10-year-old Prince Marcus appeared in the doorway, more cautious than his sister, but equally drawn to their mother. Marcus had Alexander's serious nature and analytical mind, qualities that would serve him well as future king. But Elena worried about how he might internalize the loss, how he might blame himself or feel responsible for taking care of everyone else. "Come here, my brave boy," Elena said, extending her other arm. Marcus approached more slowly, his green eyes, so like his father's, searching her face for reassurance she wasn't sure she could provide. "Father said he'll be back in time for dinner," Marcus reported, settling beside his mother and sister. "He's bringing those chocolate pastries you like from the bakery on Crown Street." Elena's heart squeezed painfully. Alexander was trying so hard to maintain normalcy, bringing home little treats and planning family activities as if routine could somehow hold back the inevitable. She appreciated his efforts while simultaneously aching for the conversation they needed to have. "That sounds wonderful," Elena said, kissing the top of Marcus's head. "Tell me about your lessons this morning. What did Professor Whitmore teach you in history today?" As her children shared stories about their morning studies, Elena memorized everything. The way Marcus's eyes lit up when discussing military strategy, how Isabella's hands moved expressively when she talked about her art lesson, the sound of their laughter when they recounted a funny incident with their language tutor. These were the moments she needed to capture somehow, the essence of who her children were becoming, so that Alexander would remember to nurture these qualities as they grew up without her. Marcus's natural leadership abilities would need careful guidance to prevent them from becoming authoritarian tendencies. Isabella's artistic nature and emotional sensitivity would require protection from the harsh realities of public life, while still allowing her spirit to flourish. The morning passed too quickly, as precious time always does. When the children left for their afternoon activities, Elena returned to her journal with renewed purpose. She had letters to write, not just to Alexander, but to Marcus and Isabella for important moments in their futures. Letters for their graduations, their weddings, perhaps even for when they became parents themselves. She also needed to record her wishes for the kingdom's future, her hopes for the charitable foundations she would leave behind, and her thoughts on various policy initiatives that were still in development. Elena had always been more than just a ceremonial royal figure. She had been an active partner in governing, and her voice would be missed in important decisions ahead. The afternoon sun slanted through the study windows as Elena wrote steadily, pausing occasionally when waves of fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. Each word felt important, each sentence a small piece of herself that she could leave behind for those she loved. Margaret returned around 4 o'clock with afternoon tea and the daily correspondence. She noticed the open journal immediately and the way Elena guarded it slightly, recognizing the private nature of what was being written. Your Highness, the Prime Minister's office called to confirm tomorrow's meeting about the new healthcare legislation, Margaret said, settling the tea service on the small table beside Elena's chair. Elena looked up from her writing, considering. The healthcare legislation was particularly important to her, aimed at ensuring better access to medical care in rural areas of the kingdom. It seemed fitting that one of her final official acts would be advancing healthcare policy, given her own current struggle. Confirm a meeting, but ask them to move it up to 9 o'clock instead of 11, Elena decided. I want to have more time afterward. More time for what? She didn't specify, but Margaret understood that Elena's energy levels were becoming increasingly unpredictable. As the afternoon wore on, Elena found herself thinking about the speech she would need to give at the upcoming Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. It was an event she had founded 5 years earlier, and this year's gala was expected to raise record amounts for pediatric care. The irony that she might not live to see the full impact of the funds raised wasn't lost on her. Perhaps this could be the moment for her to begin saying goodbye publicly, though she would need to be careful about how she approached it. The kingdom's stability was important, and Alexander would need time to prepare for the transition ahead. Elena had always been mindful of the delicate balance between personal truth and public responsibility. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of familiar footsteps in the corridor. Alexander was home earlier than expected. His diplomatic meetings apparently concluded ahead of schedule. Elena quickly closed her journal and attempted to arrange herself more upright in the chair, not wanting to appear as weak as she felt. Alexander entered the study carrying a small white box that undoubtedly contained the promised chocolate pastries. His face brightened when he saw her, but Elena caught the flash of concern in his eyes as he took in her pale complexion and the way she seemed to have sunk deeper into the chair. How did the meetings go? Elena asked, accepting his gentle kiss on her forehead. Productive, though tedious, Alexander replied, settling into the chair across from her. The trade delegation from Meridia is interested in expanding the cultural exchange programs you developed. They specifically requested to work with the Elena Foundation on some healthcare initiatives. Elena felt a bittersweet pride in hearing this. The foundation would continue her work even after she was gone, but she wished she could be there to see its growth and impact. That's wonderful news, she said, meaning it despite the sadness underlying her words. The foundation team is excellent. They'll handle the expansion beautifully. Something in her tone made Alexander study her more carefully. After 20 years together, he could read her expressions and voice inflections like a favorite book. Elena realized she couldn't continue to hide the latest developments much longer. Alexander, she began carefully, Hensworth would like to meet with both of us tomorrow afternoon. There are some things we need to discuss about my treatment plan. The change in Alexander's expression was immediate and heartbreaking. Hope, fear, and determination flashed across his features in quick succession. He had been clinging to the possibility that new treatments might extend her time significantly, perhaps even provide a cure. Elena could see him preparing to fight whatever news the doctor might bring, ready to move mountains if necessary to save her. She reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand, feeling the familiar strength of his fingers as they intertwined with hers. These hands had held her through 20 years of joy and challenge, had comforted her through difficult losses, had celebrated with her through triumph and success. Tomorrow, they would need to hold her through the hardest conversation of their lives. The late afternoon light continued to fade outside the study windows, casting longer shadows across the room. Elena knew that this peaceful moment was one of the last they would share before everything changed. Once Alexander knew the truth about her prognosis, their remaining time would be colored by the urgency of goodbye. For now, though, they sat quietly together, hands joined, watching the sunset paint the palace gardens in shades of gold and amber. Elena memorized the feeling of this moment, the warmth of Alexander's hand, the familiar comfort of their shared silence, the way the fading light created patterns on the Persian rug beneath their feet. Tomorrow would bring difficult truths and harder decisions. Tonight, There would be dinner with their children, stories and laughter, and perhaps one more evening of the beautiful, ordinary life they had built together. Elena intended to treasure every second of it, knowing that soon these simple moments would become precious memories for those she left behind. Hashtag Elena's final words overwhelm Alexander. Part 2. Dr. Hensworth's office felt smaller than usual as Elena and Alexander sat facing the physician who had become such a central figure in their lives over the past year. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the chill that had settled over the room. Elena watched Alexander's face carefully as Dr. Hensworth delivered the news she had already heard the day before. 6 months may have been optimistic, Dr. Hensworth said gently, his experienced hands folded carefully on his desk. The latest scans show more rapid progression than we hoped. We're looking at perhaps 3 to 4 months, possibly less. Alexander's hand tightened involuntarily around Elena's, and she felt the tremor that ran through him. For a man trained from childhood to maintain composure under any circumstance, this loss of control spoke volumes about the depth of his fear and grief. What about the experimental treatment in Switzerland? Alexander asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil Elena could see in his green eyes. Or the research facility in Boston? There must be something we haven't tried. Dr. Hensworth's expression was kind but firm. Your Highness, we've explored every viable option. Elena's body simply isn't strong enough for more aggressive treatments at this stage. Our focus now should be on comfort and ensuring quality time with family. Elena squeezed Alexander's hand, trying to communicate her acceptance of this reality. She had spent the past 24 hours moving through the stages of this knowledge, and she needed him to understand that she was at peace with what couldn't be changed. We should discuss practical arrangements, Elena said quietly, her voice slightly hoarse as the disease continued its assault on her vocal cords. The children need to be told, and we need to plan for the transition. Alexander stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the palace gardens where their children often played. Elena could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he held his head high despite the crushing weight of what he just learned. He was trying to be strong for her, just as she was trying to be strong for him, both of them protecting each other from the full impact of their shared devastation. How do we tell Marcus and Isabella? Alexander asked without turning around. How do we explain to a 10-year-old that he's going to lose his mother? How do we prepare Isabella for a world without you in it? The rawness in his voice broke something inside Elena. She rose carefully and moved to stand beside him at the window, placing her hand on his arm. We tell them the truth, gently and with love, Elena said. We help them understand that loving someone doesn't mean keeping them forever, but it does mean keeping them in our hearts always. Alexander turned to look at her then, and Elena saw tears in his eyes for the first time since her initial diagnosis. This strong man who carried the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders was finally allowing himself to feel the full force of his personal loss. I don't know how to do this without you, he whispered, and the admission cost him everything. You won't be without me, Elena replied, reaching up to touch his face. I'll be in every decision you make for our children, in every policy you implement that reflects our shared values, in every moment you choose love over fear. You'll never be without me, Alexander. Never. Dr. Hensworth had quietly left the room, understanding that this moment needed privacy. Elena and Alexander stood together at the window, holding each other as they watched their children play in the distance, unaware that their world was about to change forever. That evening, after the children had been fed and bathed and were settled in the family sitting room, Elena and Alexander gathered them close. The formal state rooms of the palace felt too imposing for such an intimate conversation, so they had chosen the smaller, cozier space that had always been the heart of their family life. Marcus sat beside Alexander on the large sofa, while Isabella curled up next to Elena in the oversized armchair that had become her favorite retreat. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls lined with family photographs and children's artwork. We need to talk with you about Mama's illness, Alexander began, his voice gentle but clear. Elena had marveled at how quickly he had composed himself after their devastating afternoon, drawing on reserves of strength she knew came from his love for their children. Isabella looked up at Elena with those intuitive dark eyes. "Is Mama going to get better?" she asked, though something in her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. Elena smoothed her daughter's curls, choosing her words carefully. "My body is very sick, sweetheart, and the doctors can't make it better. What that means is that I'm going to die, probably in a few months." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stiffened beside his father, his young mind immediately trying to process the implications. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from her mother's face. "But you can't die," Isabella said with the simple logic of childhood. "We need you." "I know, my darling girl," Elena replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And I need you too. But sometimes our bodies stop working even when our hearts want to stay. What's important is that we use our time together to make sure you know how much I love you and how proud I am to be your mother." Marcus had been unusually quiet, his analytical mind working through the situation. Finally, he spoke. "Will Father take care of us?" The question was so practical, so mature for a 10-year-old, that both Elena and Alexander felt their hearts break a little more. Marcus was already thinking about responsibility and the future, trying to understand how their family would function without her. "Of course," Alexander said firmly. "Nothing will change that. We'll always be a family, even when Mama isn't with us physically." Over the following weeks, Elena threw herself into preparation with the same dedication she had always brought to her royal duties. She worked with Alexander to create detailed plans for the children's futures, including their education, their introduction to royal responsibilities, and their emotional support systems. She recorded videos for special occasions, birthdays, graduations, wedding days, the births of future grandchildren. In her private study, she spent hours writing letters for Marcus and Isabella to open at different stages of their lives, each one carefully crafted to provide guidance and encouragement for challenges she wouldn't be there to help them face. The hardest part was watching Alexander try to balance his grief with his determination to make her remaining time perfect. He canceled all non-essential engagements and spent every possible moment with her and the children. He brought her flowers daily, arranged surprise visits from old friends, and planned small family adventures that wouldn't be too taxing for her declining energy levels. Elena appreciated his efforts, while simultaneously worrying about how he would handle her actual death if he was already struggling so much with the anticipation of it. She needed to find a way to help him understand that grief, while inevitable and necessary, shouldn't become a permanent state that prevented him from living fully. The palace staff had been informed of her prognosis, and Elena was touched by their response. Rather than treating her with the careful distance that often accompanied serious illness, they continued to include her in daily decisions and conversations. Cook still asked for her input on menus. The head gardener sought her opinions on the spring plantings, and Margaret continued their morning discussions about Elena's various charitable projects. This normalcy was exactly what Elena needed. She didn't want her final months to be defined entirely by her illness. She wanted to continue being a wife, mother, and contributing member of their community for as long as possible. One particularly beautiful morning in late autumn, Elena decided to visit the children's hospital that had been one of her first major projects as a royal. She knew the visit would likely be her last, and she wanted to say goodbye to the place that had given her so much purpose and joy over the years. Alexander accompanied her, along with a smaller security detail than usual. Elena had requested minimal formality for this visit. No press coverage, no official ceremonies, just a chance to spend time with the children and staff who had become like extended family to her. The pediatric ward felt warm and welcoming as always, decorated with bright murals and filled with the sounds of children's voices. Elena moved slowly through the rooms, stopping to talk with young patients and their families, listening to their stories and offering encouragement. In the cancer ward, she met 7-year-old Jamie, who was undergoing chemotherapy treatment. Jamie's bright spirit, despite her difficult circumstances, reminded Elena why this work had always been so important to her. "Princess Elena, are you sick too?" Jamie asked with the directness that only children possess. The little girl had noticed Elena's frail appearance and the careful way she moved. "Yes, I am," Elena replied honestly. "But being here with brave children like you makes me feel better." Jamie considered this seriously. "My mama says that when we help other people, it helps us feel better inside, even when our bodies don't feel good." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the wisdom in those words. "Your mama is very smart, and you're very brave." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Elena took a final walk through the corridors she had traveled so many times over the years. The walls were lined with thank you cards from families, photos from various fundraising events, and artwork created by young patients. This legacy would continue long after she was gone, touched by her vision, but sustained by the dedication of countless others who shared her commitment to helping children. Alexander was quiet during the ride back to the palace, and Elena could see him processing the morning's experiences. Watching her interact with the children and families had reminded him of her incredible strength and the lasting impact of her work. "They love you," he said finally. "Not just because you're a princess, but because you genuinely care about them." "They've taught me so much over the years," Elena replied. "About courage, about finding joy in small moments, about the power of hope even in difficult circumstances. I think they've given me more than I've ever given them." That evening, after dinner and story time with Marcus and Isabella, Elena and Alexander retreated to their private sitting room. Elena had been working on a particular project for the past few days, and she felt ready to share it with him. "I have something for you," she said, pulling a wrapped package from beside her chair. "I wanted to wait for the right moment." Alexander opened the package carefully, revealing a leather-bound book. Inside, Elena had compiled photos from their 20 years together, along with handwritten notes about each memory. The first page contained a photo from their wedding day, with Elena's careful script below it. "The day we promised forever," she had written. "Forever isn't measured in time, but in the depth of love we share. Our forever lives in every laugh, every shared dream, every moment we chose each other. This forever will continue even when I can't be with you physically." Alexander turned through the pages slowly, seeing their life together documented in pictures and words. Their honeymoon in Tuscany, the day Marcus took his first steps, Isabella's first Christmas, family vacations, state visits, quiet moments at home. Elena had captured the full scope of their shared life. "Elena," Alexander said softly, "this is beautiful. But why does it feel like you're saying goodbye?" Elena moved to sit beside him on the sofa, taking his hands in hers. "Because in some ways I am. Not goodbye to our love or to my presence in your life, but goodbye to the illusion that we have unlimited time. I want to make sure you know everything you need to know before it becomes too late to say it." She pulled out her journal, the one she had been writing in so diligently over the past weeks. "I've been working on this too. Letters for you, for the children, for various situations and occasions. I want to make sure my voice can still guide and comfort you even when I can't speak the words myself." Alexander looked at the journal with a mixture of gratitude and heartbreak. The idea of reading Elena's final words was both precious and devastating. "There's something else," Elena continued. "I need to start thinking about the public announcement of my condition. The people of our kingdom deserve to know, and you need time to prepare for the transition of duties that will fall to you." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of their marriage. They discussed timing, wording, the impact on their children, and the practical implications for the monarchy. Elena wanted to address the nation herself, to thank the people for their support, and to ask them to rally around Alexander and their children in the difficult time ahead. As the night grew late and the palace settled into quiet around them, Elena and Alexander held each other close, both understanding that their time together was becoming increasingly precious. They talked about their hopes for Marcus and Isabella's futures, their dreams for the kingdom, and the love that had sustained them through 20 years of marriage. "Promise me something," Elena whispered as they finally prepared for bed. "Promise me that you'll find joy again. Not right away, but someday. Promise me you'll show our children that love doesn't end with death, but transforms into something even more powerful, the ability to carry someone in your heart while still embracing life fully." Alexander held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I promise," he said, though they both knew it was a promise that would be incredibly difficult to keep. Outside their window, the palace gardens stretched out under the moonlight, peaceful and enduring. Soon, Elena would become part of that eternal quality, not physically present, but somehow woven into the very fabric of the place and people she loved. The thought brought her comfort as she drifted off to sleep in Alexander's arms, surrounded by the love that would continue long after her final breath. Elena's final words overwhelm Alexander. Part 3, the state dining room, had been transformed into something more intimate than its usual formal grandeur. Instead of the massive table that typically seated 40 guests for official functions, Elena had requested a smaller round table be brought in, creating a more personal atmosphere for what would be her final public appearance. The Children's Hospital Foundation Gala was scheduled for the following evening, and Elena was determined to attend despite Dr. Hensworth's concerns about her weakening condition. Elena sat in her private dressing room, watching Margaret carefully apply makeup to disguise the pallor that had become increasingly difficult to hide. Her reflection in the antique mirror showed a woman fighting valiantly to maintain her royal composure, while her body betrayed her with each passing day. The elegant gown hanging nearby, a deep sapphire blue that had always been Alexander's favorite color on her, would require careful styling to accommodate her weight loss and the medical devices she now relied on for comfort. "Your Highness, perhaps we could arrange for you to arrive later in the evening and make a brief appearance," Margaret suggested gently, her experienced hands steady despite the emotion Elena could see in her eyes. "You needn't stay for the entire event. This foundation has been my life's work," Elena replied, her voice now noticeably weaker, but still carrying the conviction that had driven her charitable efforts for years. "These people have supported our mission for half a decade. They deserve to see me there, to know that their contributions matter enough for me to make this effort." Alexander appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his formal evening wear, but unable to completely mask the worry that had become his constant companion. Over the past month, he had learned to balance his natural desire to protect Elena with her equally strong need to maintain her dignity and purpose for as long as possible. "The security team wants to review the evening's schedule once more," Alexander said, approaching with the measured steps he had developed when entering any room where Elena might be resting. "They're particularly concerned about the photo opportunities with donors." Elena turned from the mirror to face him fully. "Alexander, I know this is difficult to watch, but I need you to trust me to know my own limitations. I've been managing my energy for weeks now, and I can get through this evening." The conversation was interrupted by excited voices in the corridor outside. Marcus and Isabella had returned from their afternoon activities and were eager to see their parents before the evening's formal event. Elena's face brightened considerably as the children entered the room, both dressed in their finest attire for their brief appearance at the gala. Isabella wore an emerald green dress that complemented her dark curls, while Marcus looked remarkably grown-up in his formal suit and tie. Elena marveled at how much older they both seemed to appear each day, as if the gravity of their family situation was accelerating their maturity. "Mama, you look beautiful," Isabella said, rushing to Elena's side with the careful enthusiasm of a child who had learned to be gentle around someone fragile. "Will you really give a speech tonight?" Marcus asked, his expression showing both pride and concern. "Professor Whitmore says public speaking is one of the most important skills for future leaders." Elena smiled at her son's earnest question. "Yes, I will speak tonight. And someday you'll give speeches too. Remember that the most powerful words come from the heart, not from perfect preparation." As Margaret finished Elena's hair and makeup, Alexander reviewed the evening's timeline with the security detail. Elena would arrive at 8:30 for cocktails with major donors, participate in the formal dinner program beginning at 9, deliver her keynote address at 10:15, and hopefully be able to return to the palace by 11. It was an ambitious schedule, given her current condition, but Elena had insisted on maintaining as normal an appearance as possible. The ride to the hotel where the gala was being held passed quickly, with Elena and Alexander sitting quietly together in the back of the official car. Elena had learned to conserve her energy for the moments when it was most needed, and she used the 20-minute journey to center herself for the performance ahead. "There will be over 400 people there tonight," Alexander said, reviewing his notes one final time. "The Prime Minister will be attending, along with the Health Minister and representatives from 12 different charitable organizations." "Good," Elena replied. "This is exactly the kind of audience that can ensure the foundation continues to grow long after." She paused, leaving the sentence unfinished, but Alexander understood her meaning. The hotel ballroom was magnificent, decorated in silver and blue with elaborate floral arrangements that Elena recognized as combinations of her favorite flowers. The organizing committee had clearly put tremendous thought into every detail, and she felt a surge of gratitude for the people who had worked so hard to make this evening special. As Elena and Alexander made their grand entrance, the assembled guests rose in spontaneous applause. Elena had always been beloved by the charitable community for her hands-on approach and genuine commitment to causes, but tonight the applause felt different, warmer, more emotional, as if the attendees somehow sensed the significance of this particular evening. Elena moved through the cocktail reception with practiced grace, stopping to speak with donors and foundation supporters. Each conversation required careful management of her limited energy, but she found strength in the passionate responses of people discussing the foundation's impact on children's health care throughout the kingdom. Dr. Sarah Chun, the chief pediatric oncologist at the Children's Hospital, approached with obvious emotion in her expression. "Princess Elena, I wanted to personally thank you for everything the foundation has made possible. The new treatment wing will be completed next month, and we'll be able to help twice as many children as before." "That's exactly what I hoped to hear," Elena replied warmly. "Tell me about the families you're working with now." As Dr. Chun described several current patients and their treatment journeys, Elena felt the familiar sense of purpose that had driven her charitable work for so many years. These were real children with real families facing impossible challenges, and the foundation's work was providing hope and healing in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. The dinner program began with welcoming remarks from the foundation's board chair, followed by a video presentation highlighting the year's achievements. Elena watched the screen showing images from hospital visits, fundraising events, and new facility openings, seeing her own involvement documented throughout. When her time to speak arrived, Alexander helped Elena to the podium with subtle support that wouldn't be obvious to the watching audience. She had written and rewritten her speech multiple times, knowing it needed to serve several purposes: thanking supporters, highlighting the foundation's future goals, and beginning the process of saying goodbye without explicitly announcing her prognosis. "Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system despite its recent weakness. "5 years ago, we gathered in this same room with a dream of transforming pediatric healthcare in our kingdom. Tonight, we celebrate not just what we've accomplished, but what we've learned along the way." Elena paused, looking out at the sea of faces that included political leaders, medical professionals, business executives, and ordinary citizens who had supported the foundation's mission. "We've learned that healing happens not just through medical treatment, but through the power of community. We've discovered that hope can be strengthened and shared when people come together with common purpose. Most importantly, we've witnessed firsthand that love, expressed through care, through resources, through time, and attention, can literally save lives." As Elena continued her speech, she wove in stories from her hospital visits, describing children she had met and families who had touched her heart. She spoke about Jamie, the 7-year-old cancer patient who had taught her about courage, and about Marcus Thompson, a 12-year-old who had received a heart transplant thanks to foundation-funded research. These children and their families have been my teachers, Elena said, her voice growing stronger as she drew on reserves of passion for her subject. They've shown me that even in our darkest moments, we have the capacity to choose love over fear, hope over despair, and connection over isolation. The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. Elena could see tears in many faces, and she realized that her message was resonating even more deeply than she had hoped. As I look toward the future, I see incredible possibilities for this foundation and for all of you who support its mission. The work we've started together will continue to grow and evolve, touching more lives and creating more hope than we ever imagined possible when we began this journey. Elena's voice caught slightly on the word future, and she paused to compose herself. In the audience, she could see Alexander watching her with intense focus, ready to support her if needed, but allowing her the dignity of completing this important moment on her own. I want to challenge each of you to think about legacy, not the legacy you want to leave behind, but the legacy you want to live right now. How can your daily choices, your resources, your talents contribute to something larger than yourselves? How can you be part of healing and hope in a world that desperately needs both? The speech concluded with thunderous applause that seemed to go on forever. Elena remained at the podium for several moments, absorbing the energy and love flowing toward her from the audience. This was her farewell to public life, though she was the only person in the room who fully understood that fact. As Elena and Alexander made their way through the reception that followed her speech, she was approached by countless people wanting to express their gratitude and commitment to continuing the foundation's work. Each conversation felt like a small piece of her legacy being placed in trustworthy hands. Margaret Thornton, a young mother whose daughter had been treated at the Children's Hospital 3 years earlier, stopped Elena with tears in her eyes. "Princess Elena, I don't think you realize how many families you've saved. Not just the children who receive medical treatment, but all of us parents who found hope when we thought there was none left. Tell me about your daughter now," Elena requested, genuinely interested despite her growing fatigue. "She's healthy and strong and starting first grade next month," Margaret replied. "But more than that, she's become this incredibly compassionate little girl who wants to help other children the way she was helped. You've inspired an entire generation of young people to think about service and caring for others." Elena felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Margaret was describing. The foundation's impact was extending far beyond direct medical care into the realm of character development and social consciousness among young people throughout the kingdom. The evening concluded with a private reception from major donors, where Elena had the opportunity for longer conversations with key supporters. Alexander remained close by, monitoring her energy levels and ready to gracefully conclude any interaction if she needed rest. During the car ride back to the palace, Elena and Alexander sat in comfortable silence, both processing the evening's emotional intensity. Elena felt a deep satisfaction in having completed this final public appearance on her own terms, while Alexander struggled with the growing realization that he was watching his beloved wife say goodbye to the life she had built. "You were magnificent tonight," Alexander said finally. "Absolutely magnificent. It felt important to end on a strong note," Elena replied. "The foundation will be in excellent hands, and the people who support it understand the vision deeply enough to carry it forward." Back at the palace, Elena changed into comfortable clothes and settled into her favorite chair in the family sitting room. Alexander brought her tea and sat nearby, both of them too emotionally charged from the evening to consider sleep immediately. "There's something I need to tell you," Elena said quietly. "Dr. Hensworth believes I have perhaps 6 weeks left, maybe less. My voice is becoming increasingly difficult to use, and my energy levels are dropping more rapidly than we anticipated." Alexander's face went white at this news. Despite all their conversations and preparation, hearing a specific time frame made the reality unavoidably immediate. 6 weeks, he repeated, as if saying it aloud might change its truth. Which means we need to record my final messages soon, Elena continued gently. The video for the children, the letter to be read at my memorial service, and especially the private words I want to leave with you. They spent the next hour discussing practical arrangements with the calm efficiency that had characterized their approach to this crisis from the beginning. Elena would work with the palace's media team to record her final video messages over the next few days. She would complete her written letters to Marcus and Isabella for future milestones in their lives. And she would prepare her most important communication, the final words she wanted to share with Alexander alone. As they finally prepared for bed, Elena felt a sense of completion about the evening's gala and her public farewell. She had ended her public life on a note of hope and purpose, surrounded by people who understood and would continue her work. Now she could focus entirely on her family and the precious time they had remaining together. The next morning brought the first of what would become Elena's final recorded messages. In the palace's private study, with soft lighting and a comfortable chair, Elena spoke directly to the camera with words intended for her children to hear long after she was gone. "My darling Marcus and Isabella," she began, her voice already showing the strain that would make future recordings increasingly difficult. "If you're watching this, it means I'm no longer with you physically, but I want you to know that my love for you continues stronger than ever." These would be among the most important words Elena would ever speak, and she was determined to make each one count.